the proud citizens of the United States of America.
And saying they can do it again in 2020.
Our radical Democrat opponents are driven by hatred, prejudice, and rage. They want to destroy you, and they want to destroy our country as we know it. Not acceptable. It's not going to happen.
The president said it is not an easy job, but he loves it, and his only special interest is the American people. But the editorial board at the Orlando Sentinel not impressed, announcing it will not endorse the president for re-election without even knowing whom his opponent may be, saying in an editorial there's no point pretending we would ever recommend that readers vote for Trump. It's been another change in the president's cabinet.
It was clear that Acting Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan had hit a bit of a rough patch. There were the reports that the president was seeking alternatives, and it was clear that his confirmation had stalled because the actual request for a confirmation hearing and his actual orders had not ever been sent up to the Hill.
Fox's Jennifer Griffin reports that Army Secretary Mark Esper is the new acting defense secretary. The change comes just a day after Shanahan authorized sending an additional 1,000 American troops to the Middle East to temper tensions with Iran. Senator Rand Paul telling Fox's Your World with Neil Cavuto he can't support that.
Iran is really not someone that we depend on for oil. The Middle East, in fact, we don't depend on for oil anymore. And so, no, I think it'd be a mistake to get involved in another shooting war.
Senator Paul says he's for fewer troops in the Middle East, not more. This is Fox News.
Let's see now. Fast, easy, affordable. That's the best way to describe my home loan at Bank Pacific. Fast because we give quick decisions. Easy because we've cut back on the paperwork. Affordable because today's home loan rates are still so low. So see us today to refinance or consolidate or to buy or build your new home and save yourself some money.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender, member FDIC. Viva Bank Pacific.
Liberate your mind with laughter. Budweiser presents Hypnosis Comedy coming to Guam Liberation Weekend.
Half a day, Guam. I am comedian hypnotist Rich Guzzi, and I can't wait to see you July 20th and 22nd at the Sheraton Laguna Hotel.
With local comedy legend Frank Rios opening the show. $25 general admission, $35 for VIPs. Tickets on sale at 76 Circle K stations and at Coffee Slut. Special thanks to Community First, the Guam Daily Post, Delta Tires, Trivision, and Choice Broadcasting.
You will have the time of your life.
Liberate your mind with laughter is a GSPN production.
Cocaine, more than 16 tons of it, seized by federal agents from a container ship in the port of Philadelphia. Two of the crew members now facing federal charges.
Court documents now on file charge 2 crewmen with conspiracy to possess cocaine aboard a ship subject to U.S. jurisdiction. The crewmen admitted to loading the drugs while at sea after several boats approached to offload their bales of cocaine. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Philadelphia puts the value at more than $1 billion, making it one of the largest busts in U.S. history. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Border Patrol, and the Coast Guard all participated in the seizure. MSC Mediterranean Shipping, the vessel's owner, says it takes this matter very seriously. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
The House Judiciary Committee will interview former White House Communications Director Hope Hicks behind closed doors on Wednesday. It's the first time lawmakers will hear from a person linked to the president's inner circle since House Democrats launched investigations of special counsel Robert Mueller's report. Ms. Hicks, though, could decline to answer questions about her role as an advisor.
Has already banned the sale of flavored vaping products. That San Francisco-based e-cigarette company Juul is the real target. The city still allows the sale of tobacco products. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
In New York, I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
It's important to have claims process that works for you. At Guahan Insurance Services, we make things simple and convenient. Same door you walk in to purchase your insurance is the same door you open to file your claim. We can't pretend that the car insurance claims process is fun, but we can promise a hassle-free and speedy recovery without any runarounds. For your home, auto, and business insurance, visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center on Marine Corps Drive in Tamuning. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or give us a call at 475-1162 or text 929-SAVE. That's 929-7283.
Business travel just got easier. Take your data plan with you for only $10 a day to all 17 data-to-go destinations. Never worry about additional data roaming charges when you go where your business needs you. The US, China, Thailand, and so much more. Have the assurance you need to check emails, surf the web, and stay connected. Call 688-2677 today to make sure your account is Data to Go ready. Docomo Pacific. Better together.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms. Excuse me, I hope you... I didn't even get a chance to warn you to cover the speaker on your phone so that you didn't catch those cough germs that I just put in the airways. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, even by a cough. It just isn't going to happen. So, last couple of days, I've been talking a lot about... let's see if I can find it here. I've been talking a lot about July being Gun Pride Month. And I picked this up from the Bearing Arms website, Tom Knighton. And Tom says that, that we ought to have a parade on the 4th of July, and all of the month of July ought to be Gun Pride Month. And he said, that it was as you were. Let me go back here. June is Gay Pride Month. It used to be a single week, but it's expanded. It's a time when the LGBT community, now I wonder about the Q community, reaches out and celebrates their existence. It was used initially to remind people that gay folks existed and they weren't going to hide in the closet anymore. Ironically, many of those celebrating are trying to push us into that same closet. Well, I'm not going. I don't care if you rebrand the metaphorical closet as a gun safe. I'm not going, and not because I make my living talking about Second Amendment, Tom says. Even if I didn't, I'd still refuse to be rendered invisible. So I'm proposing that we make damn sure people know we're here and we won't be silent. Next month is July, the month we celebrate our nation's independence. How did we get independence? We shot people who thought we shouldn't have it. That's how. As such, I'm making a humble proposal to the pro-gun people throughout the land. I propose to make July Gun Pride Month. We should have a month to celebrate our support of the Second Amendment. We should have a month where we remind people that we exist, that we're their neighbors and co-workers, their doctors and lawyers, their bankers and checkout clerks. We're everywhere. More importantly, we should remind people that we're not going anywhere. So I picked up on this, and I've thrown out the challenge. Why don't we have a Gun Pride Month here on Guam, have a parade on Marine Corps Drive on the 4th of July, and I have put out the challenge, whoever wants to take charge of the Gun Pride March on the 4th of July, let me know, and I will use the authority vested in me as the sheriff of the Tall Tales Posse. Yeah, I don't use that authority very often because it's so strong, right? But I will use that authority to designate that person as the Grand Marshal of the Gun Pride March on the 4th of July. So something to think about, something to work on out there, folks, you gun carriers. Okay, and then from there we go to Zemi Ikotny. Blue pencil in hand, I carefully scrutinize each of the editorials of our 2 daily newspapers, on the lookout for grammatical errors and improper usage of the English language. Finding them and marking them up with my blue pencil, I then move on to analysis, analyzing each of the editorials according to several criteria which are part of the constitutional underpinnings of Tall Tales. An editorial ought to be edgy, hard-hitting, topical, something we can sink our teeth into. It should never provoke a ho-hum from its readers. Having found the editorial that best matches that criteria, I will award the coveted blue star to that editorial. And as I've said before, when I do that, if you happen to be in close proximity to the editorial boardroom of the winning newspaper, when I announce the blue star winner, you could hear the champagne corks popping as you stroll past the building. The coveted blue star doesn't go by default, however, unfortunately for the Post, because about half the time the Daily News is not even a participant. They run stuff from Gannett or USA Today or something like that. It's got to be a local editorial to win. And the Mark corollary to the doctrine of the blue star holds that, Bob, don't try too hard to award the blue star when it's just not there, when there is not a meritorious editorial. So I have invoked the Mark corollary on more than one occasion and said, sorry, folks, no blue star today. Neither one of you earned it. So reading the editorials today both editorials is somewhat taxing. Here's the Daily News. Our view, Guam needs to transition to a sales tax. Ensuring the government of Guam gets its share of taxes on goods mailed to Guam is good reason to convert the business privilege tax into a sales tax and to start the process right away. On Monday, Senator Joe San Augustine introduced Bill 166, which seeks to tax property arriving via the U.S. Postal Service. Only items entering Guam through the Port of Guam and the airport are assessed the 4% tax on items imported for personal use. So Joe's bill wants to collect that tax at the post office. And I surmised that Joe had gotten a hold of Doc Brown and has really tricked out DeLorean. And Joe San Augustine and Doc Brown had taken a trip back to the 60s, back to the past, from whence they came back to the future and brought the idea that had been in place back in the 60s. So that when you got a package, the postal clerk would say, I'm sorry, sir, I can't give you your package now. I've got to call customs, and they'll come over, and after they're finished, then you can take your package. So you'd stand around and wait for 20 minutes till a customs inspector came over and looked at your package, and more likely than not said, you don't owe any tax, you can go. But in the meantime, 20 minutes down the drain. So Joe had to go, I suppose Michael Fox was back there trying to pick up a package when Joe and Doc Brown jumped in the DeLorean and went back there. But anyhow, if nothing else, well, I can't get cleared up here today, real Joe Cruz. If nothing else, Joe prompted a couple of editorials in the daily newspaper. So going on with the editorial, there's no mechanism to assess tax on anything that comes to Guam via the mail. Well, there was once. It wasn't that hard. But the Supreme Court ruled that states can require internet retailers to collect sales taxes. Guam officials used the ruling to help push a sales tax, only to revoke it before it was implemented. Bill 166 would require the Customs and Quarantine Agency collect the tax. This raises a number of concerns. How will the agency be able to tell what's in mail packages? Well, I'll tell you how that worked. You opened the package and they took a look and determined how much items and packages cost. You filled out a declaration and you told them how much they cost. How would individuals pay the tax? Cash, check, or credit card? Well, then back in the day, it was cash or check. There weren't that many credit cards around in the 60s, and in order to use a credit card, you had to go to a place with one of those sliding credit card machines, and they would get out a book with hundreds of thousands of numbers in it to see if your card was still good. How would this further delay packages getting to residents? A lot. The answer to that is a lot. And the agency already lacks adequate numbers of officers. Despite increased responsibilities, it has fewer officers now than it did 20 years ago. How many officers would be needed to enforce this tax? Where would the money come from to pay for them? Always an interesting question. Who's going to pay for this stuff? If Guam had a sales tax instead of the business privilege tax, online retailers could collect the tax money. The government would only have to get it from the retailers. The business privilege tax is a hidden tax. There's no way of knowing how much of a purchase price is used for the tax. Well, the answer to that is none of it. The businessman pays a tax on his gross receipts. Not on his profits, but on the total amount that he takes in. A sales tax is visible and has a clear advantage as being one of the easiest taxes to collect. Edward Byrne, the director of the Department of... No, he's not the director of the department. Edward Byrne is the director of administration, Daily News. Should Guam transition now, starting with a 1% tax increased by 1% a year, Guam should transition now, starting with a 1% sales tax increased by 1 percentage point a year while reducing the business privilege tax likewise. Okay, well, the thinking is that all we have to do is get a note to companies like Amazon and Target and Walmart and these other companies that do business on Guam via email. You place your order on the internet, and as if by magic, a package shows up in between 5 and 7 days. So that's all we would have to do. And every month, Amazon or whoever would cut a check to the treasurer of Guam and send it out here. Really easy, right? Well, every time this discussion comes up, I always have the same problem, and that's this. It may very well be that we would just be cutting ourselves out of some, if not all, internet sales. Let's take Amazon, for instance. Amazon is a huge company. They do business all over the world. The last time I tried to buy electronics from Amazon, I couldn't. They said, we're not selling electronics in Guam. I never got to the bottom of it, but I think that there are special customs regulations for exporting electronics beyond the custom zone of the United States. Not that it can't be done, it's just that it costs money. I think there are probably a lot of companies that we were able to do business with. Now, well, let me put it this way. You remember when you first started trying to buy stuff on the internet, and you'd fill out the address portion of it, and you'd click on the drop-down menu, and it would give you Canadian provinces, the United States and the U.S., and the District of Columbia, but there was no drop-down Guam, which meant for all practical purposes you couldn't do it. And maybe you'd click on Hawaii, and put in your Guam zip code, and sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But it took a long, long time for a lot of the retailers to adapt their drop-down menus for Guam. Given the fact that there are only 160,000 people out here, I am leery of the possibility that some internet retailers are going to say, yeah, we could continue to sell to Guam, but if we did, we'd have to pay the sales tax to them. The amount of money, the amount of time and energy we'd have to spend reprogramming our stuff and doing all that, it's just not worth it. So we're just not going to sell to Guam anymore. I'm afraid there's a real possibility that we could shoot ourselves in the foot if we try to collect that, try to use those off-island retailers to collect the GRT for us. Okay, that's the Daily News editorial. And then the Post takes exactly the opposite position. I like this. This is the way it ought to be. And the Post editorial says, Senators, don't impose a tax on online purchases. One of the things that strikes Guam residents during trips to the U.S. mainland is the realization that our island life cost us so much more money in groceries, gasoline, and utilities, among other daily expenses. The good thing, though, is that the subscription price for a lifetime Tall Tales subscription is the same if you live on Guam or if you live in the mainland. It's the same price. A trip stateside is a jolt. We pay nearly 3 times the cost of groceries on Guam and twice the cost of gasoline compared to what mainland residents shell out. But we choose to live on Guam because a tropical, laid-back island is our preferred version of home. The drive to work doesn't take hours of our day. We don't need layers of clothing in the wintertime, and we definitely don't like shoveling snow. As a trade-off, we deal with a high cost of consumer goods that are made outside of the island and then flown here in days or shipped in weeks. Many of us resort to stocking up and buying dry goods and other household items that we purchase online. Shipping costs aside, many of our online purchases still make more dollar cents than buying on island for some items. This is one way for us to cope with a high cost of goods on Guam. Senators, don't take this away from us, please. We oppose recent legislation, Bill 166, introduced by Senator Joe S. San Augustine and Doc Brown. It doesn't really say that, Real Joe. That's Real Joe Cruz. That's just my ad lib, which would limit our ability to purchase goods off-island via the recent proposal to implement the existing 4% use tax on us consumers as our purchases come in through the mail. We've been hit by multiple tax increases, fees, and utility rates over the years. Economists may have different views of our island's economic future, but they do agree that salaries and wages have not kept pace with the increasing cost of living. With the exception perhaps of a select segment of our community, including political appointees and managers in the government of Guam, Senators, please hear Guam consumers, your constituents, and be sensitive to their struggles. This idea of imposing a tax on personal purchases is bad, even with the exemption of up to $1,000 a month or up to 5,000 purchases in a year. Don't make it any tougher for our island residents to afford to live on Guam. Now, that $1,000 a month exemption up to $5,000, that wouldn't be part of the mechanism of having retailers charge us the sales tax and remitting it to the government of Guam. That would only be part of Joe San Augustine and Doc Brown's bill. the $1,000 a month exemption. Okay, so there you have it. You got two, I would say, pretty good editorials here. And it's really refreshing to see them taking opposite positions on the same issue. Something here for us to get our teeth into, something to talk about, something to think about. The power of choice. You know, which would we prefer? Joe San Augustine's bill, leave things the way they are, as the Post says, or tax, apply adopt a sales tax and apply it to internet sales. I'm going to vote. Are you ready, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Yeah. I say leave it the way it is right now. I will go along with the Post reasoning. First of all, I have an aversion to taxes just on general principles. And the fewer the taxes, the better. The lower the taxes, the better. And, of course, I'm also one who's in favor of convenience. So if Joe San Augustine's bill became law, in order to collect that tax for which there's already $1,000 a month exemption, to have to stand around and what happens if the package is mailed to your house? You get a note in your mailbox, please come to the post office and pick up your package. So you go to the post office and you get there, and what it is your maintenance medication, you know, that you get from your health insurance. So you got to drive all the way to the post office, stand in line, have some customs inspector come along and look at the pill bottles, maybe shake them just to make sure, and say, oh, there's no tax on this. In the meantime, you wasted about an hour. And even if it worked, how many people receive packages worth $1,000 or more in the mail? Or if let's say a person receives packages worth $50 every day, who keeps track of the running total? It just not a good idea, Joe. Maybe you ought to go jump back in the DeLorean and go back to take this thing back to the future, take it 100 years forward, and then just leave it up there and forget about it. The Daily News, I think that the reasoning of the Post is more compelling. We don't need to figure out another way of collecting taxes. Our governor said at the time that she ran for office, we don't need no stinking new taxes. We just have to collect the taxes that are on the books. So that's one thing she said that I actually agreed with. So much for Demi Yakotny. Today I'm going to do something that you seldom, if ever, see. I've got the Daily News editorial right here in front of me. I have the Post editorial in front of me. And it's like the Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial that runs on the Post. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Do you know the answer, Real Joe Cruz?
The egg?
No. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Both! Go to Kentucky. Haven't you remember that one? Okay. So which editorial was the better, the Post or the Daily News? Both! They both got a blue. Yeah. They both got a blue star today. Now, that doesn't happen very often, especially when one of the editorials comes from the Daily News. So that ramps up the Post to 119, and the Daily News is up to 43. I got a short break here, and then we'll come back to the card, starting out with Lou and Jane versus the Nationalists.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Do you ever get bored at work? It happens to most of us at one time or another. I'm Jerry Robertson at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show with Daryl Taggarty. Let's explore how you can take advantage of workplace boredom.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Now, more Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie. Spitting truth like watermelon seeds at a summer picnic. Call now, 888-TALK, 888-8255.
I sent my I sent my bill, suggested draft bill, to all the senators on Monday. That would be kind of the local equivalent of the Hyde Amendment. And what it would do would be, if it became law, it would forbid spending any money or any local government resources on the procuring of an abortionist. You'll recall from the history of recent events that our governor, in the face of the fact that there have been no abortions for over a year, is looking for a solution to the problem. Her solution is to find an abortionist off island and bring that abortionist to island. It's not clear whether the governor wants to recruit a government employee or just entice an abortionist in private practice to come back here. But I did put together a bill that would prohibit that. And the way the bill is drafted, the primary enforcement would be the Director of Women's Affairs, who would be in charge of monitoring compliance with that bill and reporting any violations to the governor and the legislature. If you'd like to read the bill, you can go to frombob.blogspot.com, frombob.blogspot.com, and you'll find the bill right there. You can read it, digest it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I've approached this from a couple different angles. I've approached it from the angle that it appears to me that the governor is using her official position and the resources of the government to advance her own personal agenda. And I've made the argument that the last time the legislature of Guam spoke on the matter of abortion was in the 20th Guam legislature, where the anti-abortion bill passed unanimously. The courts have declared the bill unconstitutional, but the legislature has never repealed it. So I advance the proposition that the public policy of the island is what the legislature adopted in Public Law, was it 2025-54, because it was never repealed. And that being the public policy of the island, in the absence of any kind of a legislative go-ahead, I think that the governor can be seen as only advancing her own personal agenda. Same goes for Jane Flores, and I wanted to prohibit that. That's one way of looking at it. I mentioned just kind of in passing that the Archbishop of Springfield, Illinois, passed the word that no member of the Illinois legislature who passed a very strong abortion law would be permitted to take communion. That according to the sacraments, the rules of the sacraments of the Catholic Church, you can't be an abortion supporter and take communion. That was something else I touched on. sticking primarily with the governmental aspect of it and what I would call the moral aspect of it. And also, I don't like to be forced to pretend something or go along with pretending something that I know is not true. And to say that a baby, a child in the womb, is not a human being, it's too much. That requires a degree of pretending that I'm not prepared to participate in. You know, when I was a kid, I believed in Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny and all that stuff, but no more pretending. And the way the wokesters work nowadays, if you don't go along with the forced pretending, like two men can have a marriage, or that lump of flesh inside the mother's body isn't really a human. It's just a part of the mother's body. And since it's her body, she could do with it whatever she wants. I'm not prepared to pretend that. And I also look at it from a moral standpoint. And like so many things, the answer you get depends on how you phrase the question. And this is the way I think the question needs to be phrased. When is it all right to purposely take the life of a human being? And my answer to that question is never. I should have put the word innocent, of an innocent human being. Never. One of the things that our humanity and our morals are based on is that we kind of have to look out for the weak and the indefenseless and the voiceless. Well, there's no one more weak or voiceless or independent than the child in the womb. So when is it okay to purposely kill that innocent, defenseless person? My answer to that is never, and I'm not going to participate in any high-level semantic pretending to make it seem like it's okay. And it occurred to me there's another way of looking at this, and that's from the nationalist standpoint. If there are any nationalists out there and any rational radio listening audience, I have a graph here that shows the number of abortions between 2008 and 2017. It's right here. You see that? You see the blue there? The blue doesn't stand for Democrat. That blue portion of the graph is Chamorros. So of the about 2,700 abortions conducted between 2008 and 2017, a little over 1,000 were non-Chamorros, 1,603 were Chamorros. So, you know, people that like to use big words might say, well, this amounts to genocide. It's a killing off of a disproportionate number of Chamorros. And here's another way to look at it if you want to look at it through a nationalist framework. That is that our legislature said no abortions. We don't want abortions on Guam. In Public Law 2554. And a group of three folks in black robes in San Francisco, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said, no, we're not going to let you do that. We're going to overrule what you did, and we're going to tell you how to do it out there in Guam. We're not going to give you any flexibility on this at all. This is our rule, and whether you like it or not, we're going to impose it upon you. Yeah? How does that sound for nationalism? So we're killing, with abortions, we're killing Chamorros by a large margin, more than anybody else. And the reason that we can't have a law that would put a stop to it is because of these folks in black robes, these politicians in black robes say that can't do it. Okay, Marcus, you're getting kind of predictable here. So I've got Marcus on line one. Good afternoon, Marcus.
Day, Senor Klitzkie and Guahan. I wanted to talk about it from another perspective, those in the white road. And before I get into it, I would like to say that at one time I was a little bit hypocritical when I was younger, and I made the mistake of considering suggesting an abortion once. And I thank God I never went through with that idea, and I repented, and God really convicted me of that. But the Hippocratic Oath is what our medical professionals supposedly take, and what is the essence of that oath again?
First of all, do no harm.
Yes, again. So how would a doctor come to a conclusion that aborting a baby does no harm?
Well, the doctor has to go through that semantic acrobatics to do the kind of pretending that I said I won't engage in. Because aborting a baby is not health care by anybody's definition.
So then that would be the definition of hypocrisy.
Hippocratic hypocrisy, right?
It's sad. And now that I'm older, I understand more, and I realize how vile that is and how evil that is, not only to the child, but, you know, the mother goes through what they call a remorse, PTSD period too, and the family's affected by it as well. And you know, we can avoid all of that just by, I don't know, coming to terms with our mistakes. I dropped you. But that's all right. That's all I wanted to really share.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling, Marcus.
Okay. Thank you.
See you later. Yeah, that's another way of looking at it. So for me, no matter how you look at it, it's just something that we shouldn't be doing. And, of course, right now, the politicians in black robes have stepped in, Roe versus Wade, and a couple of cases before that where they had this search and replace feature on their word processors. They ran the Constitution through it, and they found a right to privacy that no one had ever been able to discover before. And that constitutional right to privacy is the basis for finding that a baby in the womb is not a person for abortion purposes. So there's hope. You know, the Supreme this term the Supreme Court has decided two cases where they adopted kind of my favorite justice's approach to things, Clarence Thomas. They've adopted an approach that if it was wrong when we decided it, the fact that it's been on the books for 40 years doesn't mean that we shouldn't do the right thing. And the Supreme Court has done that in 3 different cases now, suggesting, and that's always been one of the hang-ups, because the way the Supreme Court wants you to think it works is this, that it's not a Republican court or a Democrat court, that the justices, when they put on those black robes, put aside all concepts of party or party affiliation, liberal, conservative. Yeah. And so the justices want you to think that they approach things in a very open, even-handed, neutral, unbiased sort of a way. So if a case has been on the books for a long, long time, if a decision's been on the books, they are wont to change it just because the personnel on the court have changed. Stare decisis. But that appears to be changing. And, of course, the less adherence there is to the doctrine of stare decisis, the easier it will be for the court to overturn Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And that, of course, is what all of the fighting was about with the Brett Kavanaugh confirmation. You'll remember the senator from Hawaii that I really get a kick out of, Mazie Hirono, said that she couldn't believe Brett Kavanaugh because she didn't like his position on abortion. Kind of taking a page from Kirsten Gillibrand's book, that people who don't believe in abortion are just bad people, and they can't be trusted, and they can't be believed. So the whole abortion thing is so important to the left that if they ever lost control of that, their whole leftist empire would start to crumble very, very quickly. And that's why that Kavanaugh confirmation was so fiercely fought. And that's why conservatives now are saying, well, Kavanaugh got confirmed. We've got 5 of ours and 4 of theirs. It's a little bit more complicated than that, if for no other reason than the fact that our Chief Justice, John Roberts, seems to have a penchant for voting with the liberals just so that he can appear to be even-handed. But I'll be keeping an eye on that for you, and I'll be keeping you informed as we go along. Okay, moving along into the next part of the agenda here, of the card, putting, let's see, we've talked about Lou and Jane versus the Nationalists, and that also encompassed AOC versus the Hyde Amendment, Michelle Armenta versus Jane Flores, Tall Tales versus abortion procurement, Maria Espinosa versus Lou and Jane, and Lou versus babies. We are now down to some new territory on the card, San Nicolas versus Bordallo and Babauta. Bordallo means Madeline Bordallo, our former congressional delegate, and Babauta is, what's his first name? The governor's chief of staff?
Tony?
Yeah, Tony Babauta. Yeah, Tony Babauta. Okay, and the title here is San Nicolas accuses Babauta of making false statements. Guam delegate Michael San Nicolas has released a letter from Deputy Assistant Treasury Secretary Michael DeRoma, which affirms that his War Claims Correction Bill, as currently drafted, would accomplish the objective of making amounts in the Claims Fund available for disbursement to Guam World War II victims and survivors. San Nicolas' bill is scheduled for a markup hearing Thursday in the House Natural Resources Committee. San Nicolas told the Post he released the letter in response to remarks made by Guam's Washington liaison and former delegate Madeline Bordallo, who criticized his bill by saying it was flawed and was unlikely to be approved by the House committee. So there's a little bit of a skirt-tearing contest going on there between San Nicolas and Bordallo. Bordallo, of course, lost to San Nicolas. He beat her pretty handily after she'd been there for so long. Possibly some hard feelings, some sour grapes involved here. San Nicolas told the Daily Post that Bordallo's statements are reaching the committee, and the letter from DeRoma is necessary to remove doubt about the legislation. He said false statements on federal issues by Bordallo caused serious injury to the people of Guam. And I don't doubt that at all. I made that same point myself every time we've discussed this. You know, we have a process in Washington that San Nicolas is trying to fix what Madeline screwed up. It's something that has to be fixed in the Congress, and we've got Governor Lulian Guerrero attempting to steal the spotlight from San Nicolas, aided and abetted by Speaker Tina Rose Maybe Barnes. And it appears to be a chase for earned media. Okay, I've got a break coming up here, and we'll be right back to pick this up.
When it comes to power and performance, nothing compares to Dodge. And right now at Cars Plus in Mighty, you can save thousands on many Dodge vehicles in stock during our Dodge Performance Days. Like a new 2019 Grand Caravan SE, save $4,250, or save $6,150 on a new Durango SXT. Looking for more power? Take home a new Charger SXT Plus today for only $37,689, or save over $7,000 on a new Challenger GT. Get more power and performance at Cars Plus in Mighty during Dodge Performance Days. Cars Plus, driven by you.
Family Finance has been serving the people of Guam since 1959, and they'll continue to be there for you in the years to come. Whether you're looking to get a personal loan for that summer vacation or paying off those long overdue bills, Family Finance has got you covered. Apply for a personal loan from $1,000 up to $3,600 by calling Family Finance in Agutya at 475-4545, Upper Tumon at 647-5626, or in Dededo, 633-4473. Family Finance, serving the people of Guam since 1959.
Okay, so I'm going to take a break here from San Nicolas versus Berdallo and see what I can learn from Chris today. Good afternoon, Chris.
Actually, good afternoon, Bob. I was calling to discuss this issue, and I thought a card item might be kerfuffle versus fiasco.
There's only one. There's only one thing wrong with that suggestion for the card, Chris. The only thing wrong with it is I didn't think of it myself. But it's a good idea. Kerfuffle versus fiasco, yeah.
So I'm thinking, and this is derived from a back and forth that I had in the 32nd Guam legislature with then Speaker DJ Cruz. And there was a time when there was a reconciliation of unremitted Section 30 money to the government of Guam. And so it was a windfall of sorts that came to Guam. And the governor at the time wanted to use a bulk of that money to pay tax refunds. So I introduced a bill to appropriate, I think, about $9 million of the 30 or so million that was available for tax refunds. At the time, the speaker said, cut the politics, cut the checks, that the governor had the authority to basically pretty much do as he willed with those funds once they're remitted to the government of Guam. So I know we went through this exercise of introducing the bill in Congress, and one of the things that had happened during that for the purposes of paying war claims with our own money, supposedly as a placeholder, one of the things that happened was there was a determined formula by which we would calculate the excess of Section 30 monies to be available to expend on war claims. I'm wondering, Bob, the fact that that formula has already been established, if the entirety of the Section 30 funds were remitted to Guam, why couldn't we just do that as an exercise ourselves anyway?
One would think so, yeah. I mean, since actually the governor has pretty much control over the Section 30 money, he could have just done it himself. You're right.
That's the sort of thing. I think this is being very, very much overthought. And I listened, I know I committed a sin here, but I listened to another show where there was an interview with the then Chief of Staff, Matt Herman, and he indicated that this was going to happen no matter what. When the bill was drafted, he was instrumental, maybe drafted the bill himself as the Chief of Staff for Madeline, that no matter what, because of the conditions in Washington he opined that he was under the impression that Hillary Clinton would win and they'd be able to clean all this stuff up when she was president. But obviously that didn't happen, and there was, so they didn't have the kind of clout they would have, particularly in the Appropriations Committee in Congress, and the will of the presidency and the administration. To kind of say, okay, this money is deemed appropriated and, can be used for that purpose. saying that anything that would have an influence on the Treasury has a score, and every time it gets a score, no matter what, it's going to have a hard time passing in Congress. So going back to basically the opinion of then Speaker, and he was the appropriations chair at the time as well, that when that money comes in and it's remitted and transferred to the bank accounts of the government of Guam, basically anything that the governor has the authority to expend funds on in the general fund basically can be, and especially as the tax commissioner and the individual overall in charge for all of the revenues of the government of Guam by virtue of the way the Organic Act set up and the departments and agencies set up on the executive branch, that basically since the formula exists, they should just take the appropriation from Section 30 as it comes in, figure out what the excess is over and above what was determined as the Section 30 line of demarcation. I think it's about $6 million this year. I think that number was 72. We're expecting 78. And so there would be $6 million available for payouts, and just ask Congress to remit the claims to us as approved and vetted by the War Claims Commission overview.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I think that perhaps the reason to go that Madeline went and did the congressional route instead of something more simple, which it would have involved just us deciding what to do with our Section 30 funds, is who you assign the blame to is always very important.
That's a fact.
Yeah, so by going the congressional route, Madeline could say, well, you know, they won't give us the money any other way, so I've got to do this thing with the Section 30 money, where if Congress, and then Congress becomes the boogeyman.
Yes, instead of us spending our own money, right?
Yeah, and of course no politician wants to be the boogeyman here in the island. Much better to let Congress be the boogeyman, right?
Yeah. So I'm not entitled to a blue pencil, so I'll have a white pencil, and I'm going to award kerfuffle.
The kerfuffle versus, what did you say? Kerfuffle versus?
Fiasco.
Fiasco. And you think that kerfuffle beats fiasco this time, right?
I'm going to be polite. Fiasco has a more chaotic connotation.
Okay. Well,
it's probably fiasco.
Yeah, well, you know, wielding this blue pencil every day, Chris, is quite a job. So I really appreciate your help. And
no problem. Like I said, I've earned the blue pencil, but I'll use my white one.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Take care, Bob. Have a great day.
Thank you. Former Senator Chris Duenas, who knows a little bit about fiascos and kerfuffles himself, having been a senator for a couple of terms. Okay, so back to San Nicolas versus Berdallo. San Nicolas said false statements on federal issues caused serious injury to the people of Guam. And as I was saying, I've made that point myself because the last thing we want to do is make it look like our rep in Congress doesn't have the backing of the people back home. That would be the kind of thing that would concern any congressman. The congressman from Wyoming, if he thinks the folks in Wyoming are down on him, take special notice of that, and he's going to do the same thing with senators from other jurisdictions. So we'll come back to San Nicolas versus Berdallo right after that big halftime show that you've all been looking forward to.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The president says 4 more, please. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News, formally announcing his campaign for re-election last night in Orlando.
Because my only special interest is you.
The president taking shots at the opposition and the media over the special counsel probe.
The only collusion was committed by the Democrats, the fake news media and their operatives, and the people who funded the phony dossier, crooked Hillary Clinton and the DNC.
The president said the only thing they'll understand is an earthquake at the ballot box, the election 502 days from now. Potential 2020 opponent, Senator Bernie Sanders, reacting in a social media stream to his supporters.
Our job, most importantly, is to defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
Senator Sanders says he thinks the president is living in a parallel universe. President Trump says there'll be developments on immigration in the weeks ahead, saying he wants the country to be a sanctuary for law-abiding citizens. But California's Governor Gavin Newsom offering support for illegal immigrants in his state, saying in a video posted on social media,
"And without a warrant, you don't have to open the door. Without a warrant, you do not have to open the door. You have the right to due process. You have the right to legal representation."
And to the undocumented in California, Governor Newsom says, "We have your back." In Philadelphia, what could be the country's largest ever seizure of cocaine found aboard a container ship in the port.
16.5 tons of blow hidden in 7 separate containers. Investigators say they got swabs from crew members' arms and hands to detect illegal drugs. Meantime, authorities say the ship's second mate confessed to bringing the cocaine on board.
Dave Kinchin of Fox 29 in Philadelphia, who reports on the street that stuff would have been worth more than $1 billion. This is Fox News.
Hey, it's Mom. Somebody forgot to thaw the chicken, so meet us at Chili's for 2 for $25. Oh, and congratulate your sister for making the basketball team. She's thrilled. Love you. See you at Chili's.
Enjoy 2 full meal combos for $25. An appetizer, 2 mouth-watering entrees like our crispy chicken breast, smoked barbecue quarter leg, or smoked jalapeno cheddar sausage. Served with corn on the cob and french fries. 2 bold combos for $25. A full-on meal deal available nightly for a limited time. Together, we Chili's.
Let's go for a drive.
Let's take a stroll. Let's gallivant.
Let's go cruising.
We all have different ways to describe how we get up and go in our cars. But whatever you may call it, you can do more of it when you save 6% off your fuel purchases at any Shell station when you use your eligible Bank of Guam Visa and MasterCard credit cards. So stop by any Guam or CNMI Shell station and start saving today. Visit bankofguam.com for more information. Terms and conditions apply. Bank of Guam, the People's Bank. Member FDIC.
Opinion.
He's led the Pentagon since the departure of General James Mattis, but now the acting defense secretary is out as well.
Patrick Shanahan has been acting defense secretary since January. His nomination to be the next secretary of defense had been announced. Now it's been withdrawn.
I'm sure the decision between the two of you has been a good decision in light of a lot of the accusations and the problems that could come from that.
Senate Armed Services Committee Chairman Republican Jim Inhofe describing his surprise during a brief phone call with President Trump shortly before the announcement. Published media reports detailed episodes of violent domestic disputes several years ago between Shanahan and his ex-wife. Democrats have questioned the vetting process. On Capitol Hill, Jared Halpern, Fox News.
Also on Capitol Hill today, Hope Hicks, the former White House communications director. She's to appear before the House Judiciary Committee, but behind closed doors. White House counsel urging her not to answer questions about her time as a presidential advisor, citing executive privilege. A mother and daughter in Canada, for them, drinking and driving appears to be a family affair.
When Magog, Quebec police called the mother to pick up the daughter, they didn't expect mom to walk into the police station as drunk as her offspring. Both mom and daughter getting the same treatment, their driver's licenses suspended. It all started when cops spotted the 27-year-old daughter behind the wheel of her car, stuck on the side of the road. The mother, who was later called to the police station to pick up the daughter because the daughter's car had been impounded, failed a sobriety test. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
Asian stocks closing Wednesday higher, a day after the Dow jumped 353 points. The Nasdaq added 108, and the S&P 500 closed up 28 points. Dow futures are trending slightly lower, but the Dow is on pace for its best June since 1938. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Ready to buy real estate on Guam? Congratulations! But what now?
There are so many questions, so many things to do. Where do you start? The best place to start is to call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty, Guam's biggest name in real estate. They aren't the best because they're the biggest. They're the biggest because they're the best. Trust the name. Find out why. Call Century 21 Commonwealth Realty today. 888-2121. Trust the best.
If you're driving, chances are you'll need gas soon. And by the growl in your tummy, a trip to the grocery store too. But don't just buy gas and groceries without getting double miles. Instead, apply for the new United credit card from First Hawaiian Bank and start earning double miles towards your next trip. Gas, groceries, getaway. With the new United credit card, apply at FHB.com. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC. Equal housing lender. Additional terms, conditions, and restrictions apply.
Another outstanding halftime show here on Tall Tales. The marching bands, the cheerleaders, the drill teams, the synchronized card sections up in the stands, and then the finale with that barrage of cannon fire. It's so exciting. Not quite as exciting as San Nicolas versus Bordallo and Babauta, however, which I was working on before the break began. You'll recall, for those of you who are joining just joining now, Mike San Nicolas and Madeline Bordallo have been going at it because San Nicolas is trying to, my analysis, San Nicolas is trying as hard as he can to get legislation through the Congress that would allow the Treasurer to disperse payments to those claimants whose claims have been adjudicated. Madeline Bordallo seems to be standing on the sidelines throwing monkey wrenches into the machine that San Nicolas is trying to build. So we pick it up here. San Nicolas said false statements on federal issues by Bordallo caused serious injury to the people of Guam. In response, Bordallo told the Daily Post in a phone interview Wednesday that she spoke with House Natural Resources Committee members who told her there were errors in San Nicolas's bill that needed to be corrected. She declined to predict the outcome of the House committee vote, saying, "I think it's just wait and see." She said she did not want to get drawn into a conflict with San Nicolas. She didn't want to get drawn into it when she started it. "I'm just not getting into it," is the quote. That's a completely dishonest thing to say, stated San Nicolas in a remark posted on Guam Daily Post's website. The bill is in markup as is, and the committee staff have made no changes to it. In fact, it was drafted in consultation with the committee. In a statement accompanying his release of the letter from the Treasury Department, San Nicolas wrote, "It's unfortunately we have to repeatedly go back and repair damage to the progress of H.R. 1365 by the administration via the Washington liaison." Now, the Washington liaison is Madeline Bordallo, who lost her position in Congress and was hired by the Leon Guerrero administration to be Washington liaison. San Nicolas said, "I don't understand why the administration via its Washington liaison insists on working against H.R. 1365 when they repeatedly say they support it. H.R. 1365 was introduced by San Nicolas to correct flaws in the World War II Loyalty Recognition Act submitted by Berdallo last year, which has prevented the Treasury Department from releasing any of the reparation checks that have been already awarded to Guamanamco, who survived the Japanese occupation in World War II. So, what we've got here is San Nicolas introduced a bill to correct the problem that Madeline created, and then Madeline has come out and said, well, I talked to Congressman so-and-so. He said that San Nicolas's bill will never make it through markup. San Nicolas gets a letter from the Treasury Department that says, your bill is fine. San Nicolas tells us that he was working with the Treasury Department to put the right language in his bill. So the bill will go to markup tomorrow. What that means is that the members of the committee will sit around, and if they think the bill needs any changes in order to go to the floor of the House, the changes will be made in the markup session. I don't anticipate that there will be any changes. And I suspect San Nicolas doesn't either, but it seems as though Madeline Berdallo is trying to cast a shadow over everything San Nicolas does. And who does Madeline Berdallo work for? Lou Leon Guerrero. And then Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes maybe is working on a bill that maybe make it possible to maybe pay local funds and maybe collect a promissory note from the person to who receives the local funds, so that maybe when that person gets his check from gets their check from Washington, maybe they would pay back the government of Guam. So it's very clear that neither Tina or Lou and the administration have put together this mechanism that they say would speed up the process, and it's also very clear that they're trying to steal the limelight from San Nicolas if they can, and in Madeline's case, spoil it, spoil it for San Nicolas. So that was the article that appeared in the Post. The Post has a place where readers can place comments at the end of an article. And sometimes they're pretty pithy. But San Nicolas himself put a comment after this article, and this is what it says. Quote, corrections have been made, close quote. That is a completely dishonest thing to say. The bill is in markup as is, and committee staff have made no changes to it. In fact, it was drafted in consultation with the committee staff. The governor needs to reconsider the employment of this Washington liaison, as well as the Guadeloupe chief of staff, who are spreading false information on behalf of the government of Guam that does not sit well federally. Washington liaison, Madeline Berdallo. Guadeloupe chief of staff, Tony Babauta. It creates disbelief in Washington on all of our other issues like EITC, Compact Impact, Veterans Help, receiverships, etc., because the credibility of Guam is ruined by such dishonest comments. Federal agencies and congressional committees are all stunned at the blatant dishonesty coming out of Guadeloupe on this issue. So I'm going to have to rule here. Yeah, I'm ruling in favor of San Nicolas. Yeah, thank you, Real Joe Cruz. He's the only representative we have in Congress. So we need for him to be effective to help us. So we shouldn't be sitting over here in Guam making his job more difficult, which it appears is what Madeline Berdallo is doing. And of course, Madeline Berdallo works for Lou Leon Guerrero. I don't know what role Tony Babauta plays in this, but Tony Babauta, of course, was an assistant secretary of Interior until he got fired And I suppose, at least in his mind, he's a Washington insider. But in this particular case, I think what we need to do is, if San Nicolas says, please do this or please don't do that, I think we need to go along with him. Because he's the only game in town when the town is Washington. Okay, so much for San Nicolas versus Berdallo and Tony Babauta. Okay, next I've got Linda Uggan versus Richard Ibanez. This is a story that just broke this afternoon. All three covered it. PNC didn't cover it, but both newspapers did and the Post did. And they're, instead of waiting for their next newscast or whatever, they popped it up online right away, causing me to wonder who is the one who's spreading the news. The news is that Linda Uggan got fired. She was given her final notice of adverse action. That's not the kind of thing that makes the news all by itself. When a director gives a notice of final action to an employee, he doesn't copy the media in on it. In fact, until the Civil Service Commission makes a final determination on an appeal, those adverse action papers are, guess what, Real Joe Cruz? Confidential. You know why?
It's a personnel matter.
Yeah. It says it right in the law that these things are not to be spread around. So how did the three news outlets get a hold of these? And then each of the news outlets interviewed Robert Koss, who works for the Guam Federation of Teachers. So let me go through the KUAM write-up of this. It's probably the best. For almost 20 years, she's been at the forefront of ensuring Guam's artifacts are preserved, researched, and investigated. But now Linda Uggan finds herself fighting to preserve her employment. Well, she's not fighting to preserve her employment. She lost her employment. She's going to be fighting to get her employment back. And then here's a quote. This smells of retaliation. Quote, Guam Federation of Teachers attorney, Robert Koss, who represents Linda Uggan, said, I didn't know that Robert Koss is an attorney. And I don't think Robert Koss is an attorney. Uggan is a state historic preservation officer, which is referred to cryptically as the SHPO. Linda Uggan is the SHPO of the Guam Historic Resources Division, which falls under the Department of Parks and Recreation. KUAM News has confirmed Uggan was terminated on Tuesday. Attorney Koss believes it's in response to a grievance she filed on April 8th related to a GHRD employee under her direct supervision that was detailed to the Department of Parks and Rec's director's office. So it looks like this is what happened. Somebody worked for Linda Uggan. That person, instead of working for Linda Uggan, was detailed to the director's office instead of out from under Linda Uggan's supervision. Uggan conveyed her displeasure with the personnel order and the fact that proper protocol was not followed in first informing her. The personnel order was signed by DPR Deputy Director Victor Villagomez. Quote, detailing the employee has hampered and will continue to hamper the division in carrying out its mandated function, Uggan's grievance said. So apparently the Post has access to all these documents. To detail the employee to the director's office is unreasonable and a total disregard of the division's mandates. So this is Linda Uggan telling her boss that when you detail that employee from out of my office into yours, it was unreasonable. According to Koss, he was denied access to a May 14th investigatory review by Assistant Attorney General Donna Lawrence and denied Ugland her due process right to his representation. Well, I think Attorney Koss there has found a right that I hadn't heard about. That if management wants to interview an employee, I don't think it's a violation of due process to not allow his, quote, attorney to be present. On June 4th, DPR Director Richard Ibanez responded with a notice of proposed adverse action where he cited official misconduct because Ugland used an official government vehicle when she filed her grievance in April. Koss adds that along with the notice of proposed action, his client was notified that she is also under some sort of criminal investigation by the Attorney General's office. It's not sounding too good, is it? Allegedly, the employee made false statements. It's really not clear. The document is very convoluted, Koss said. Koss, in a June 14th letter to Ibanez, stated that when, quote, an investigatory interview occurs and the employee makes a clear request for representation before or during the interview, management must grant that request or terminate the interview. I understand that you may have been misinformed, but whatever the case, information obtained through a denial of due process is entirely inadmissible in both administrative and criminal proceedings. Wow, I guess Koss has got his own law and order notebook there. Yeah, these are things that I wasn't aware of. It's a good thing I'm reading this.
Maybe he listens to your show.
Well, I wouldn't have said any of these things, so he didn't get this from the show. But maybe he does anyhow. Maybe he'll call in and explain this denial of due process and his kind of theory of the poisonous fruit of the poisonous tree, because an employee was interviewed and was not allowed access to counsel during the interview. Ugland, meanwhile, has been in the headlines over the past couple of weeks with the recent discovery of ancient artifacts on military buildup construction sites. She has been vocal in how the military has been handling the artifacts and questioning whether they're complying with the 2011 programmatic agreement. The agreement mandates that the military must stop work in areas they find artifacts or remains and perform what's called, quote, data recovery, which means any and all artifacts will be removed from the sites, analyzed, and stored somewhere else so that build-up construction can continue. After the work plan, they're going in there, further investigate the established boundary of the site, collect everything, and then wipe it off the face of the earth, Ugland said in an interview with KUAM. KUAM asked Koss if her termination could also be tied to her concerns about the buildup. Now, get out your tinfoil hats out there, everybody in our international radio listening audience. I see him over there, the smart money sitting in his lazy back, the lazy boy chair. Yeah, the military put pressure on him to get rid of her because she's too much trouble, slowing the buildup down. And they got to get rid of her. That's one conspiracy theory, right? Koss said, we discussed that. We're not aware whether or not the director has any sort of relationship with the military, you know, and that or other construction projects that she might be, and the article says that she might be impending. Where's my blue pencil here? I think they mean impeding. Yeah, impeding is quite a bit different from impending. We don't have that information, and I doubt they would tell us that. According to the governor's communications director, Janela Carrera, the governor was not aware that the state historic preservation officer would be served with a notice of final adverse action at the time it occurred. She is aware of it now. So this will be an interesting story. So when a director fires someone, at least in the director's mind, he thinks he has good reason for it. But I can tell you there are times when a governor might think those reasons aren't good enough because I have my own reasons. So I don't want you to fire that person, or I want you to unfire that person, or take it easy on that person, or something like that. So if Richard Abanis fired the shippo and Lou didn't know about it, this could be more interesting than the story itself, the interplay between Richard Abanis and the governor as to what, if anything, to do about Linda Uggan. One thing that governors don't really particularly appreciate is surprises. So I could suspect that the governor is saying, you know, if you're going to do that, you got to tell me. I don't want to be blindsided by these things. And perhaps the director is saying, I ain't telling anybody, because if I do, somebody will try to put the skids under it. So this is going to be very interesting as it plays out. I wouldn't be surprised if I have a bout on the card here within the next few days, Governor Leon Guerrero versus Richard Abanis, Director of Parks and Rec. Would not surprise me at all. Janela Carrera adds that Abanis will serve as the acting state historic preservation officer until the governor can appoint a new one. So, Richard Abanis, now you get to do all of that extra work. Guam law mandates that the SHPO must have training, work experience, and education pertinent to cultural resource management. And only serving in an acting capacity, according to his Abanis only serving in an acting capacity, according to his nomination packet released by the governor's office in January. Abanis has more than 20 years of managerial experience, sales, marketing, technology, golf course management. And the beverage industry. He is also a former Guam national volleyball player. Parks and Rec, you know. Half of Parks and Rec is recreation. Now, Senator Therese Terlahi. I remember way back, before these guys were even seated, before we seated 10 females in our legislature, I looked in my crystal ball and I said the opposition to the buildup will not be head-on and direct. It's going to be in the form of cultural and environmental resistance. And we've seen Therese Terlahi, you know, every time she sees three people standing around in a street corner, she gets out and joins them because she thinks they might be demonstrating about something. A couple of other senators, same thing. Now, the article goes on to say, Senator Therese Terlahi, legislative chair on historic preservation and land committee chair, said she's troubled by the administration's move in the midst of military construction projects, including the bulldozing of 5,000 acres of limestone forest and numerous historic sites. So I want you to make a special note of this, Real Joe Cruz, and remind me of this tomorrow. Therese Terlahi is troubled. Somebody else was troubled. Who was that? I can't even remember the issue. It'll come back to me sooner or later, yeah. But she's troubled. Yeah, so I suspect that she's thinking, you know, we really need the SHPO, and why are they doing that to her? She couldn't have done anything that bad that would cause us to do without the SHPO. It was going to be, you know, tearing around saying things like, this place will disappear from the face of the earth. And then here's a quote from Therese Terlahi. The SHPO, in her official capacity, had to witness and carry the burden of representing Guam and the Chamorro people in the face of 10 years of the largest buildup in the history of peace. I had high hopes this new administration would help shore up the legal or other expert resources that office needs to truly represent Guam. A move like this leaves Guam vulnerable to further bulldozing of historic sites and leaves Guam voiceless during a critical period of potential harm to our culture and our environment. Silencing and intimidation are the opposite of standing up for the people of Guam. Okay, so seventh inning stretch, and I'll come back to this. And next I've got is Sabina versus Lou Leon Guerrero on the budget, but I'm going to stay with Linda Ogan for a little while.
Hey, welcome to this Subway ad for the new club collection. How do you want it?
I'll take a book club.
Absolutely.
So, last week we sunk our teeth into Subway's meaty new release, the Steak Club.
I didn't finish it yet.
Oh, not again, Sandra. This week, it's the new Southwest Chicken Club, also by Subway. No spoilers, but there's a tasty twist.
Jalapeno cheddar bread and guacamole?
Sandra, get out. Subway, make it what you want.
Good ending.
Limited time only at participating restaurants.
Your home is one of the most important investments you'll make in your life. At Nanbo Insurance, you can rest easy knowing that you're covered with reliable and affordable homeowners insurance. Nanbo makes it easy to protect what matters the most so you can enjoy the moments that matter the most. With Nanbo, you can also save big when you bundle up and insure your car, home, motorcycle, or business. Enjoy great savings up to 50%. Visit nanbo.com or call 477-9754 for more details.
Okay, so the seventh inning stretch. I hope everybody had a chance to get up and move around a little bit, grab a cold drink or whatever, because we only got 2 more innings of Tall Tales to go here today. And I think before I jump back into Richard Abanis versus SHPO, I'm going to just take a peek at some of the comments on the on Facebook here. I've got Richard V. Leon. Little Lou LG was a nurse. Jane Flores can nominate Little Lou LG as abortionist. And then Maria Espinosa, sounds like a great idea for the senators to introduce that bill. But will anyone? Well, that's a good question, Maria. In the email that I sent out alerting people to this bill, I included a link that would lead you to the senator's contact info on the web. It's pretty easy to find. You go to the 35th Guam Legislature website, and you can find the email address and the phone number for every senator. And you might want to give each of them a call or send them an email. Those who have identified as pro-life ought to come out and say, yeah, that's a good idea. I'm going to introduce it. The ones who come out as pro-abortion, I would suspect, to come out and say, yeah, I'm not going to introduce that, but what I'm going to do is repeal 54, the one that's mentioned in that bill. Either way, citizens who are interested in this matter can cause senators to come out and identify themselves and where they are on this important issue instead of just staying in the background. So that's my answer to your question, Maria. Next question, Richard V. Leon, delegate loser. Let's see, Madeline is declared, Madeline is a certified loser by the Guam Election Commission. TMB and Little Lou LG sponsor their foot in their mouth. True enough. And then we've got David Lebowski. She needs to go home. And well, I think maybe if you're talking about Madeline Berdalio, maybe she is at home, Washington. And she hasn't lived here for a long time. And then Gary Shane Hales. Sounds like San Nicolas is saying, stop the fake news. Yeah, you're right, Gary. Stop the fake news. And then Richard V. Leon, fire Richard Ibanez. Well, I suspect that that's something that we're going to have to wait and see what happens. If the governor is going to succumb to whatever pressure Therese Terlahi can bring to bear, that might be the way out. And then I've got Richard V. Leon, political fix all the way, just saying. And the Guam politicals say and do nothing. And Don Etkalani, where is your cat? Bring your cat to work on Wednesday. Isn't the conflict dispute regarding the new Congress legislation for Second War reparations between Delegate San Nicolas and liaison Madeline Berdalio the appropriate time for the local Guam media to do fact-checking to see who is more accurate or correct? Yeah, I agree. And then we've got Andre Bainum, a very famous name. Build-up agreements signed, money spent, and construction underway. Our senators would do better to spend their time helping the people instead of fighting windmills, tilting at windmills like Don Quixote, thinking that they're all, what, dragons? Yeah. Okay, well, so much for our Facebook comments. If you're on Facebook Live right now, make sure you click on that share button. And there's still time to call in and hear your own voice echoing throughout the depths of our international radio listening audience. All you got to do is call 888-8255, 888-TALK. And if you're in the mainland, 671-888-TALK. And if you're in a country other than the United States, remember the country code for the United States is 1. So that would make it 1-671-888-8255 if you want to get in on the conversation here on Tall Tales. So, yeah, obviously Therese Terlahi is, I think if you analyze what Therese Terlahi is saying, she's saying, I don't want to see Linda Uggan fired. She's too valuable. So put her back to work. And perhaps implicit with that is, unless she did something really, really wrong, kind of a balancing of the equities here on Therese's part, 5,000 acres of limestone forest. Linda Uggan's been doing it for 10 years, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's another interesting thought that pops into my head. Linda Uggan has been around for a long time. has a lot of contacts, and obviously has her own, what we would call, power base within the government. She's perhaps made alliances and et cetera. And Richard Ibanez, according to his resume, is just coming into the government of Guam from outside. So Richard Ibanez probably comes in and says, well, I'm the director here, and I'm going to call the shots, and I'm going to do things the way I think is right and the way I want them done. And the fact that somebody's been around here for 20 years doesn't mean that that person has veto power over my decision. Those things happen in the government of Guam very frequently. In fact, I suppose they happen in any large organization. So maybe we had a showdown here between Richard Ibanez and Linda Uggan to find out who is really the director of Parks and Recreation. A potentially extremely interesting story that, of course, I'll be following for you and giving you the benefit of my pithy comments as time goes on. I don't have a lisp. Okay, next item on the card is Sabina Paris versus Lou Leon Guerrero. Sabina Paris is pushing for an independent private audit of tobacco tax collections after a wholesaler submitted evidence to her office that an unnamed company pays an overwhelming majority of the tobacco tax, even though this business accounts for less than half the market share on Guam. During the budget hearing for the Department of Revenue and Taxation on Tuesday, Paris said, "We've been approached by one of the wholesalers." She said the tobacco wholesaler gave her office documents showing that the amount of tobacco taxes they contribute is 80%, yet they have only 50% of the market share. I'm going to put a whole stop on this for a minute. I'm going to see what John can add to the conversation. Hi, John.
Hey, good evening, sir. How you doing?
Good.
So I had a thought here, and this ties into the Madeline and St. Nicholas concerns that we're having here. My question is, and I thought I read it in the U.S. House of Congress ethics rules, for those that have left Congress, there's a one-year cooling off period that each representative, each congressperson needs to take before they do any type of actions that may or may not influence a decision made on certain things by engaging with other previous colleagues that are in the House of Representatives or Senate. And I read that on the Congressional Ethics website, and I thought, doesn't this apply to Madeline as well?
When Governor Leon Guerrero appointed Madeline, this was discussed. What is Madeline going to do in Washington? She can't lobby because she can't lobby for a year after the end of her term. So what's she going to? That was the way the question was posed. So I see where you're going, John.
I asked the same question on K57, and it was stumped the monkey because they were like, "What?"
Well, what can I say, John? You're not on K57 now. You're on Tall Tales. So we have the answer for everything here, right?
Right. And so isn't she not supposed to, though?
Well, you have to wonder when I can't remember the Congress's name, but she did report that she had been talking to a congressman who said that St. Nicholas's bill wouldn't make it out of markup. So
that was the same the representative that signed the letter that stated it would. So that's why Congressman Nicholas got the letter, was to...
Well, he got that from the Department of the Treasury, but there was a member of the House who said, Madeline said, well, I was talking with Congressman so-and-so of the such and such committee, and he said that St. Nicholas's bill will never make it out of markup. And I thought thought at the time, why is she having a tete-a-tete with that congressman?
And that's exactly my point. Shouldn't she be, because there are fines and penalties for former representatives that they have to face if they are found guilty of doing such a. And nobody wants to get her in trouble, but the rules apply to you too, former delegate Berdalia.
Nobody wants to get her in trouble except Mike San Nicolas, probably.
And I'm surprised Mike hasn't leaned on that ethics rule that is sitting out there that says you can't do that, Madeline.
Well, I'm not familiar enough with the rule to be able to determine whether that chat with that member of the House would invoke the provisions of that ethics
I was
rule.
at my computer because I had it up the other day, and I was going, shaking my head going, any action that would sway the thought process the way I interpret it. I mean, it's real simple. It's an ethics committee rule on former representatives, delegates.
And if you want to put a fine point on it, John, Madeline's relationship with San Nicolas would come within the same rule, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
He's a member of the House of Representatives, right?
Yes. So, and therein lies the point. Where do we draw the line and say, okay, I'm sorry, former Congresswoman, but you shouldn't be. But when I heard her interview on the other station, and she said, I just have to wait. I just have to wait for the governor to give me the green light, and I'm on it. But you can't. You have a federal guideline that says you can't. Right? I mean,
yeah. Well, you know, if you're let's talk baseball for a second, and let's say you've got a manager, right? And the team is not winning, and you got to fire the manager. After you fire the manager, would you want to put him back on the team as a second baseman? Maybe not, right? Maybe he's
not even a switch hitter.
Yeah, not even a pinch hitter, right?
Or a pinch hitter.
Yeah, maybe he ought to go play for another team because he's just going to be a thorn in the manager's side. Whether
and that's the conversation that's happening in present time Guam, and you know, and I hate to say it, but you know, day late, dollar short on all the effort that you're trying to put forth now. You know, I'm sorry, but that's just my thoughts, and I thought I'd share that with you because that just blew my mind when I read that in the ethics committee guidelines.
Yeah, that's a good point, John.
All right, well, thanks, sir.
Thanks for calling, John. Yeah, that's another interesting angle, isn't it? Well, you know, Madeline's did her time in Washington, et cetera, and maybe it's time. One of our Facebook posters here said, David Lebowski said she needs to go home. Maybe it's time for Madeline to finally hang up her spikes and give San Nicolas as much space as she possibly can. Okay, so going on with this article about unpaid tax here. When contacted after the hearing, Paris said if there's another company that has an equal market share, they should be paying an equal share of taxes. For example, if one company is paying $3 million in taxes, she said the other company with the same market share should also be paying about $3 million. That's not the case, Paris said. Obviously, RevTax needs to step up its enforcement. Now, once again, our governor, when she was campaigning, said, we don't need any new taxes. We just need to collect the taxes that are already on the books. And here's Sabina Paris saying, come on, RevTax, you're not doing it. And when Sabina Paris says that about RevTax, where does that go? It goes right back to the governor because the director of RevTax is appointed by the governor and works for the governor. Paris declined to name the wholesaler who came to her office. Taxes are supposed to be paid on tobacco products when they are removed from the warehouse by the wholesaler for distribution. A RevTax officer is supposed to be present and collect a tax payment when that happens. In a recent letter to Paris, Public Auditor Benjamin Cruz recommended that the bonded warehouse system be scrapped. Paris said she's developing legislation to require an audit of the bonded warehouse system and of the taxes wholesalers have paid on tobacco products. The Office of Public Accountability can audit only government agencies, but for private entities, DRT has the authority to require an audit, Paris said. Over the past 2 years, numerous questions have been raised about tobacco tax collections, although few answers have been provided. In June 2017, RevTax filed a $14.7 million tax lien against Midpack distributors. Midpack is one of the leading companies in the Calvo Enterprises Group. Midpack commented in a previously issued news release that it had worked out a payment arrangement with RevTax after an internal audit showed it did owe some taxes. The exact amount owed and the payment schedule were not announced. In 2018, the Office of the Attorney General gave Midpack and other tobacco wholesalers a September 30 deadline to produce documents showing proof of tax payments as part of an ongoing investigation into tobacco products payments.
In illness and in wellness, Calvo's Select Care is health care that is there for you. That's why over 80% of the Guam medical community places their trust and insures with us. We offer our members wellness and fitness programs for a healthier lifestyle and provide a comprehensive medical network on and off island to help members from unexpected illnesses. Contact Calvo's Select Care today for more information.
I had another article dealing with Senator Sabina Paris and the Department of Revenue and Taxation, where she criticized the budget that the department had presented and said it wasn't enough. I didn't bring that article. I'll bring it tomorrow for sure. But the department needs a lot of equipment. And one of the things that I saw the department asking for, which I think is an extremely good idea, was $300,000 to hire an in-house attorney. I've chirped about this before on Tall Tales, that in the 28th Guam legislature, a statute was enacted allowing the Director of Revenue and Taxation to hire to establish an in-house law office. Nobody ever got around to doing it. But there are a few agencies that really need counsel. The Department of Corrections, the Police Department, Department of Revenue and Taxation really need to have in-house lawyers. Now, of course, the usual reaction is from RevTax, well, if we need a lawyer, we'll just ask the Attorney General to send somebody over. And that is just dumb. Lawyers are not fungible. They're not all the same. You don't buy them by the carload. If you're going to have a lawyer at the Department of Revenue and Taxation, he ought to be someone who has a really good handle on federal income tax and ought to be skillful at dealing with all of our local tax laws. We used to have such a guy here on the island. His name was Cohen. Yeah, his first name will come back to me in a second. Yeah, he was really good, but he was dissatisfied with the way things worked in the government of Guam, so he packed up and left. We could perhaps ask Jane Flores to attempt to recruit a retired IRS lawyer, somebody who's worked for the Internal Revenue Service, understands the system, and would like to come out and spend some of his retirement years with us out here on Guam. Because the way it is right now, when there's a tax problem that comes up, the taxpayers are represented by high-powered accountants and lawyers. The Department of Revenue and Taxation is represented by lay people. They're nice lay people, probably people that try very hard. But, you know, it's like Sedfrey Linsongen trying to file a suit. It just isn't going to work unless you got a lawyer involved. So the idea would be to establish a law office at the Department of Rev Tax, set it up so that it's kind of a career position, a good job that a lawyer would want to take and spend, you know, much of his professional life doing. And perhaps one lawyer wouldn't be enough. Perhaps a lawyer and an assistant or a couple of assistants. Because the way we're set up now, the Department of Revenue and Taxation not only collects taxes, but it is also for all kinds of regulatory functions, cockfighting, alcoholic beverages, on and on and on. So to put a lawyer in that office, I think, is an extremely good move. But of course, the budget that a department submits is controlled by the governor. You know, a director can go in and lobby hard with the governor or the gnomes of, as I used to refer to them, the gnomes of BBMR, pound on the table, make all kinds of arguments, but when you come down to it, the budget that you submit is the one that the governor approves. So if you are a Democrat and the chairman of a committee and you're examining the budget from a Democrat governor's agency and you say, this ain't enough, what you're doing is you're contradicting the governor in your own party. And a lot of senators just aren't willing to do that. They don't want to get on the wrong side of the governor. Now, apparently that doesn't apply to Sabina Paris. I'll go into that a little bit more tomorrow because it's exactly that kind of tension is kind of what makes the government function the way it should. The director of an agency should be a lot of things, but one of the things he should be, at least the way I see it, he should be a boundary manager. And by that, what I mean is that he establishes a boundary around his agency, and he won't let things into the agency that shouldn't be in there. Things like political interference. Somebody wants to come in and make a political call about who gets what job or what promotion. The director, as boundary manager, says, no, we aren't going to do that. So it's a director's job to keep outside of the boundary the things that his department doesn't need, but at the same time, it's the director's job to gather within that boundary the things that his agency does need. And that's where the director's relationship with the governor is key. So maybe I'm seeing some positive signs here for Sabina Paris. I'll pick that up tomorrow.